Welcome to Revenge with Luna. You're not doing anything important anyway, just transfer me the money before noon. That was my cousin's voice, not asking, telling, from the guest room of my apartment where she had been living rent-free for 7 months. I stood at my kitchen counter, coffee going cold in my hand, and I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because she genuinely believed it. My name is Jenna. I'm 31. I work in commercial insurance, the kind of job people glaze over when you explain it at parties, but the kind that paid for a 2-bedroom apartment in a good part of Charlotte, a car I owned outright, and a savings account my cousin had been quietly treating as her emergency fund since last spring. Her name is Mara. She's 26, and up until that Tuesday morning she had been the family's favorite story, the one who moved to the city to find herself, the one who was so brave for leaving her hometown. The one everyone talked about at holidays like she was doing something revolutionary by simply existing somewhere new. What they didn't know, what I had not yet told a single person, was that I had already decided that weekend she was leaving. I set down my coffee. I have a meeting in 20 minutes, I said. We'll talk tonight. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in pajamas at 9:30, holding her phone like a prop. It's literally $200, Jenna. I need to pay my trainer. Her personal trainer. Right. I said, we'll talk tonight. I picked up my bag and walked out. She called something after me. I let the door close on it. The drive to work was quiet in the good way. I'd started to appreciate silence the way people appreciate water after being thirsty too long, with a kind of desperate gratitude. My apartment hadn't been quiet in 7 months. There was always music from the guest room, always dishes left in the sink, always some version of Mara moving through my space like she'd built it herself. She had moved in April. The story then was that her landlord had sold the building and she needed 2 months, maybe 3, to find a new place. I'd said yes because she was family, because she was 26 and alone in a city, because my mother had called and said it would mean the world. That was 7 months ago. The 2 months became 3, 3 became 5. By month 6, she had stopped mentioning moving out entirely. She'd started getting packages delivered to my address. She'd given my address to her gym, her subscriptions, a dentist. She had, in every quiet and practical way, moved in permanently without ever asking. And I'd let it go on too long. I knew that. I'd kept thinking one more month, one more conversation, one more chance for her to do the right thing on her own. That was on me. But the version of me who drove to work that Tuesday morning had stopped waiting. That Thursday was our aunt's birthday dinner. Family gatherings at my Aunt Rose's house were a specific kind of theater, warm food, loud voices, and an unspoken agreement that Mara could do no wrong. She was the youngest of the cousins on that side. She'd always been handled gently. I had spent 3 days deciding whether to say anything that night. In the end, the decision was made for me. I got home from work Wednesday to find a notification from my bank, a Zelle request from Mara, $450. The note just said, "You know why." I did not, in fact, know why. I went to the guest room and knocked. "Come in." She was on her bed, laptop open, takeout containers on the nightstand, mine from the fridge that I had been saving. She looked up without any particular expression. "What's the Zelle request for?" I asked. "My credit card," she said, like this explained everything. "I'm a little short this month." "Mara, I've covered your credit card 3 times now." "I know. I'll pay you back." She turned back to her laptop. I stood in the doorway of the guest room, my guest room, and I looked at her, really looked, and I realized she wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't uncomfortable. She was bored by this conversation. "I'm not sending it," I said. She glanced up again. "Okay, whatever, I'll figure it out." And she smiled, just slightly, like she knew I would come around. I didn't sleep well that night. Thursday came gray and cold, the kind of November evening that makes a house feel smaller. I drove to Aunt Rose alone. Mara had texted that she'd get a ride with her friend Pam, which I suspected meant she was still not speaking to me over the Zelle request. Aunt Rose's house smelled like it always did, garlic and candles, old wood and warmth. Half the family was already there when I arrived. My Uncle Bert, my cousin Donnie and his wife, my mother, my grandmother, my aunt's neighbor Phyllis, who had been coming to everything for 20 years. My mother caught me at the door. "You look tired." she said, hugging me. I'm fine. Is everything okay with Mara? She texted me that things have been tense. There it was, of course. Mara had gotten there first. We'll talk later, I said. Tonight's about Aunt Ro. Dinner was good. The food was always good at Aunt Ro's. For the first hour, everything was normal. People passing dishes, someone telling a story about a neighbor's dog, my grandmother asking 3 times whether anyone had tried the green bean casserole. Mara arrived halfway through dinner with Pam. She swept in, kissed Aunt Ro on the cheek, apologized loudly for being late in a way that made everyone smile, and slid into the empty seat across from me. She didn't look at me. Dessert came out early because my grandmother always asked for it early. And that's when my Aunt Ro, setting a cake on the table, said warmly, Mara, I hear you've been doing so well. Your mom says you got some exciting things in the works. Mara smiled. Yeah, I've been working on a few things. It's been a good year. I kept my eyes on my plate. It's so nice, Aunt Ro continued, that Jenna could be there for you while you got settled. You two have always been close. Oh, she's been amazing, Mara said, and her voice was so easy, so warm. Truly, I don't know what I would have done without her. My mother nodded. My uncle raised his fork. And something settled into place. She has been generous, I said. My voice was calm. I made sure of that. 7 months of free rent, utilities, groceries, a few credit card bills. The table went a little quiet. Mara's smile stayed on her face, but it changed shape. Jenna, my mother said. I'm not saying it to embarrass anyone, I said. Aunt Ro asked how Mara has been doing. I think everyone deserves the honest answer. This isn't the place, Mara said. Her voice had dropped. You texted Mom that things were tense, I said. You told her your side before I could say a word. So yes, this is the place. My Uncle Bert frowned. What's going on? I took my phone out of my purse. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I just opened my bank app and pulled up the transaction history I'd saved as screenshots months ago just for this conversation. I'd known, somewhere in the back of my mind, that this day would come. I slid the phone to the center of the table. 7 months, I said. I covered her half of nothing because I live alone and she pays nothing. I've sent money for her credit card 4 times, her car insurance twice. I paused. Last week she asked me to Zelle her $450 for a credit card bill. I asked what it was for. She said I'd know why. I looked at Mara. I didn't. Mara's jaw tightened. You're making it sound like I've been using you. I'm describing what happened. You said you didn't mind. I said I'd help you get on your feet. There's a difference. Aunt Ro was very still. My uncle was looking at the phone. My mother's face had shifted into something I couldn't read. I also want to show you something else, I said, and I pulled up a screenshot I'd taken the week before. Mara's Instagram. A photo of her at a spa in Asheville, the kind of place that costs $300 a night. The caption read, "Needed this reset, so grateful for the people who make it possible," and she had tagged my city, my neighborhood. I had not paid for that trip, but anyone reading that caption would wonder. Where did the money for Asheville come from? I asked. Mara's face flushed. That was my own money. So you had money for a spa weekend, but not your credit card. That's not, she stopped. Mara, my uncle said, and his voice was careful and tired, is what she's saying true? She's twisting it. I have the dates, I said. I have the transfers. I'm not twisting anything. The table had gone very quiet. My grandmother was looking at her hands. Pam, Mara's friend, was studying the tablecloth. My mother cleared her throat. Jenna, maybe we... Mom. I looked at her directly. You called me in April and asked me to take her in. You said it would mean the world. I did it, and I never said a word because I didn't want to cause drama. But she texted you this week to say things were tense, which means she was already telling her version. I'd like the room to have mine. My mother closed her mouth. Aunt Rose set her hands flat on the table. She was 63 and had the kind of quiet authority that comes from having seen everything. Mara, she said, did you pay Jenna rent? Silence. Any rent? Any contribution? Mara's eyes filled. I was going to. For 7 months. I was going through a hard time. We have all, Aunt Rose said carefully, gone through hard times. We don't live in someone's home for 7 months and let them pay our bills." The tears that came down Mara's face then were real. I could tell the difference by now. These weren't the performance tears she used when she wanted the room on her side. These were something smaller, more private. The tears of someone finally, for the first time, unable to spin the story. She looked at me. "I didn't think it was a big deal to you. You make good money." And there it was. "Making good money," I said quietly, "doesn't mean you get to take it." My uncle nodded once, like something had been confirmed. Mara pushed back her chair and walked to the hallway. I heard her in the bathroom, water running. My mother came to sit next to me. She didn't speak for a moment. Then, "You should have told me sooner." "I know," I said. "I kept hoping it would resolve itself." "She told me you'd offered, that you insisted." I looked at her. "And you believed that without asking me?" She was quiet for a moment. "I should have asked?" "Yeah," I said. "You should have." That was the closest thing to an apology I would get that night. I took it. Mara came back to the table for about 10 minutes, long enough to say goodbye to Aunt Ro and collect her coat. She didn't look at me when she left. Pam followed her, offering a small, apologetic smile as she passed. I helped clear the dishes. Aunt Ro squeezed my arm in the kitchen and said, "You're a patient woman." I said I'd been too patient. She said, "Maybe, but you found your line." I drove home through the cold, quiet streets, thinking about that phrase. Your line, I had one. I just needed to find it. The apartment was lit when I got back. Mara had gotten home before me. I could hear her in the guest room, moving around. I made tea and sat on the couch and didn't turn on the TV. She came out around 11. She stood in the living room doorway with her arms crossed, and she looked very young and very tired. "I need to know how long I have," she said. 2 weeks, I said. "I'll help you find options if you need them." "I can't find a place in 2 weeks." "You've had 7 months to save for a deposit, Mara. If you spent the money I gave you on other things, that's not something I can fix for you." She flinched. "You don't have to be cruel." "I'm not being cruel. I'm being clear. Those are different things." She went back to her room. I sat with my tea until it was cold, listening to the apartment settle around me. Outside the window, the city was its usual nighttime self, distant sirens, a car passing, the orange glow of streetlights on the ceiling. I thought about the version of myself who had said yes in April, who had given the guest room key without a real conversation about timelines or expectations, who had watched the months go by and told herself it was fine, it was family, it would work out. I didn't hate that version of me. She'd been trying to be good. She'd just forgotten that being good to someone else doesn't require being bad to yourself. The 2 weeks that followed were quiet and uncomfortable in the way that necessary things often are. Mara packed in stages, carrying boxes down to her car over several days. We didn't talk much. She ate separately, kept to her room, nodded when we passed in the hallway. My mother called twice. The first time, she asked if I'd consider giving Mara more time. I said no. The second time, she said she thought I was handling it well. I thanked her and changed the subject. At one point, I found a note on the kitchen counter. It just said, "I'll pay you back." I folded it and put it in a drawer and didn't respond. I didn't need the money. What I'd needed, what I had finally taken back, was something harder to name. On the last day, Mara loaded the final boxes into a friend's truck. I watched from the window, not to check on her, just because it was the end of something and it seemed right to mark it somehow. She rang the doorbell before she left, which I thought was strange given that she had a key. I opened the door. She stood on the step in a coat and scarf, her car running at the curb. She looked like herself again, not the version of her that had been cornered at Aunt Rose's table, just herself. Her regular face. "I want you to know I'm not angry at you," she said. "Okay," I said. "I know I handled things badly." She paused. "I think I convinced myself you didn't mind because it was easier than dealing with it." It was the most honest thing she'd said to me in a year, maybe longer. "I know," I said. "I let it go on too long, too. I should have had this conversation in month 2. She nodded, eyes down. "Where are you staying?" I asked. "With Pam for now. She's got to pull out. I have some interviews lined up." "Good," I said. "I hope they go well." She looked up. "Do you mean that?" I do, I said, and I did. Wanting her out of my apartment had never meant wanting her to fail. That was a distinction she'd never quite believed about me, and I wasn't sure she believed it now. But I meant it. She left. I closed the door, and the apartment was just mine again. I stood in the entrance hall for a moment, listened to the silence. It wasn't the heavy, loaded silence of the past 7 months, the kind that had someone else's presence pushing against it from the other side. It was the clean quiet of a space that was finally, simply, mine. I put on music, made dinner from scratch for the first time in months, just because I wanted to, just because I could cook without someone asking what I was making and whether there was enough for two. Weeks later, I was at a work event when my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number that turned out to be Mara's new one. I got a job, real job, benefits, downtown. Starts in 2 weeks. Just wanted you to know. I sat with that for a moment. Then I typed back, "That's great. I'm glad." And I meant that too. The holidays came softly that year. I hosted Christmas Eve for the first time, just a few friends, my neighbor Caro, who had nobody to celebrate with, and my friend from college who drove up from Columbia. The table was small and lit with candles, and there was too much food and exactly the right amount of noise. My mother came for an hour on Christmas afternoon. We sat with tea and didn't talk about Mara. We talked about my grandmother, about a trip my mother wanted to take in the spring, about a book she'd read, normal things, good things. At one point, she looked around my apartment, tidy, mine, warm in the afternoon light, and she said, "It looks different in here." "I rearranged some things," I said. She nodded, but I think we both knew that wasn't what she meant. There's a version of this story where I come out of it certain and unbothered, where every decision was clean and every consequence was deserved. That's not the version I lived. I lost sleep over it. I second-guessed myself more than once. I wondered if I'd been cold, if I'd been fair, if I'd handled the dinner at Aunt Rose with more grace than cruelty or less. What I came back to every time was this: I gave someone I loved a real chance. 7 months of real chances. What I stopped doing was pretending that my patience had no bottom. That's not coldness. That's just finally understanding where you end and someone else's problem begins. And some lessons you can only learn by finally letting yourself be done. I've thought a lot about the moment Mara said, "I didn't think it was a big deal to you. You make good money." Not because it was cruel, though it was, but because she believed it. That's the part that stayed with me long after she drove away with her boxes. She had looked at my life, seen something stable and built, and quietly decided it was available to her. No conversation, no agreement, just a quiet assumption that my work existed to absorb her convenience. What I had to reckon with was my own role in that. I knew by month 3 that something was wrong. I knew by month 5 that I was enabling something I didn't believe in. And I kept finding reasons to wait. She's family, she's struggling, one more month. That patience wasn't virtue. It was avoidance dressed up as kindness. Real integrity isn't just about what you refuse to do to others. It's about what you refuse to accept for yourself. I've been failing that second part for a long time. The dinner at Aunt Rose didn't feel like a victory when it was happening. It felt uncomfortable and sad and necessary all at once. I hadn't gone there to humiliate Mara. I'd gone because she had already started shaping the story, texting my mother, framing herself as the wounded one. And I understood that silence, in that moment, was just permission for the wrong version to take hold. Speaking up wasn't aggression. It was honesty. And honesty, even when it's hard to deliver, is the only foundation anything real can be built on. What I've come to understand is that the outcome, Mara getting a job, texting me months later, something shifting in her, didn't happen despite the hard conversation. It happened because of it. When I stopped softening reality for her, she had to meet it herself. That's not punishment. That's just how growth actually works. We don't learn from being protected from consequences. We learn from facing them. I also had to be honest about my own intelligence in this. Not book smarts, but the kind of clear-eyed thinking that says, look at what is actually happening, not what you wish were true. For months I had been choosing the comfortable interpretation over the accurate one. Mara will come around. She just needs more time. She means, well, maybe. But meaning well and doing well are different things, and I had been counting meaning for too long. The resilience part came quietly, not in the dramatic moment at the dinner table, but in the weeks after, the calls from my mother, the discomfort of an apartment in transition, the second guessing at 2 in the morning. Holding a boundary isn't a single act. It's a daily decision to keep holding it even when the people around you wish you wouldn't. That took more out of me than I expected, and it gave back more than I expected too. The apartment felt different after Mara left, not just quieter, cleaner, in some way that had nothing to do with tidiness. Like I'd given myself back a room I hadn't realized I'd been locked out of. Some things only come back to you when you finally stop giving them away.